Bouncing Statistics presents Hear My Voice. We are bringing the NHS, the West Midlands Police and the community to one open conversation.
With us. And you know, because sometimes often as you hear it's called Hear My Voice, I can speak for many in this conversation right now who honestly probably feel as though their voices haven't been heard and are not being heard. And I have to commend you as well, because I know you came out and you said your piece about kind of the institutional racism and bias, and you was the first person to do that. So honestly, as an actual person as well, I have to appreciate the fact that you've done that. As you would know with yourself, being the top of, let's say, the food chain comes the most responsibility. And it's weird because I'm sitting here talking to yourself now, and I've always thought to myself growing up, what would I say if I had the opportunity? But now it's come to it, I'm kind of lost for words of what I would say. I know some of the things that you did say I can touch on as well. I know you spoke about how you apologized, in particular to the Black community. And you noticed that obviously you want to have more people of color in the force as well. And, you know, we're trying to build that trust in communities is something that's been difficult. And there's been obviously a history that's been created, you said, and there's a narrative not to be trusted. Me being myself, I'm 26, normal person here now, as I said, my passion, it's bouncing statistics. I eat, live, breathe this. This is me right now. And going through my own journey, noticing the track and the journey I've been on and the other people that similar to myself, I think as you would notice yourself, the higher up you go, you are responsible for what is happening. And it's the same issues for me that kind of every month that we've came on here, we have members of the community that are a whole load older than me. And they obviously always say to us, they've been saying this for years upon years upon years. I know Dawn's here as well. She said it herself. And I think I had a little quote from Malcolm X, and he said, obviously, the future belongs to those who prepare it for today. So with yourself, I honestly believe that the future of the little kids that we can't see, that I come in contact with on a regular basis, that tell me these stories again and again and again, I'm putting my trust in you. And I can guarantee a lot of people in the chat today probably don't even know who you are. And also Malcolm X said this, and this one hit me to my core, if I'm being totally honest. He said, if you're not ready to die for it, put the word freedom out of your vocabulary. Me, I'm only 26. But I promise you right now, I don't actually feel like a lot of people my age have or are free. We all face the same issues. The statistics show, once again, bouncing statistics show that these issues are there. And I want to be optimistic. And I had a meeting with Suki the other day. Suki's been great, been helping on the journey. A lot of officers here have been as well. But yeah, we've got 15 officers on board of this mission out of, what is it, nearly 7,000. I want to know, how can we instill this confidence in not even just the Black community, because it goes for anyone of all colors, races, ages, whatever you are. How can we instill these things? Because for me, once again, you hold the biggest burden. And when I can hear stories of little ones, when I'm meeting him on Thursday sessions and I'm telling him he has to wear better clothing because the police are going to speak to him in a type of way. How do we get past this narrative? And that's what I kind of want to pose to you to kind of kickstart. But once again, I appreciate you taking out the time today as well.
No problems. I'm delighted to get the chance to come and speak to you all. So I suppose I'll try and pick out bits, because these things are better when we get into dialogues and questions rather than me kind of talking for ages. So I think the starting basis, I would say, is that we didn't get into the position with the relationships between authority, establishment, and communities around Black people overnight. The last 5 years, there's hundreds of years of issues that create societal issues, that create prejudices, that create stereotypes and issues around that. And so, you know, there is an enormous range of issues that lead up into and beyond policing, and also lots of ways policing was founded. Where we are now in 2022, I think is this. I think we are in a position where the bar on legitimacy around policing is moving higher and higher in lots of levels. So it's not just around Black communities. We saw the stuff around Sarah Everard and issues around women. There are lots and lots of issues or expectations. And of course, the velocity and visibility about what the police do and how they operate in communities is rapid, and the degree it circulates and goes around, and it's also global. So many the things, and we'll talk directly about things West Midlands Police has to do. I'm not going to hide behind America or the police forces, the met and everything. But there's a kind of constant imagery, noises, issues that are focusing on what the police do and how they do the job. And of course, what we do know about the police is it's not just what you do, it's how you do it. The biggest means of driving up confidence in communities is not what the things the police often do, it's how they go about doing them. And West Midlands Police in 2021, we'll see what the census says, but Birmingham may be a minority majority city. And we are not a minority majority police force. We are quite a long way. So we're hovering about 14% of our staff from Black and ethnic minority communities. Black people are not choosing to join as police officers in large numbers in West Midlands Police. Let's be really clear. And there are lots of issues here and now around that. And because we are predominantly a white and a male organisation, there are attitudes, beliefs, approaches, and views that are more dominant in the outlook. Sorry, there's a few. Oh, there we go. We've gone quiet, which is good. So there are many things about where we come from, what we do. I think the other around us as an organisation, our outlook, and we've been doing a lot of work, I think, over the years with some aspects of policing that have changed it dramatically. So, there are a lot more, for example, more senior women there are more women in policing than there are men in nursing, and there are more senior women in policing than there are in comparable professions that are like nursing or something. So one of the things we can see in policing is some of the culture is changing around actually being more measured in terms of gender, but it's not tipped and shifted significantly around what is largely a white organisation. So we also are faced with some pretty serious challenges about policing a pretty unequal society, because the issues that Black communities or minority communities face, we know educational impact, we know about some of the social and economic factors. We know the most diverse wards in the West Midlands are actually the ones with highest rates of unemployment, and policing finds itself often policing those areas. And I think some would say over-policing, and people may be feeling underprotected. But we find ourselves, I think, trying to deliver a mission in an environment where it's not equal. So kind of then, I guess I come back to the bits that I said that we're sorry about and what we're doing. And we'll probably touch upon some of the events that happened at the beginning of this week and the recent conviction, which I can't talk a lot about, and I'll explain why. But, I think we know, don't we, that and in our interactions on the street, we know it around our use of force that we're disproportionate around it. We went through a massive, I think, cathartic moment with George Floyd as a service. I think there was a lot more facing up to where we are, and another kind of huge kick around that, I think, to where we've got to as an organisation. I would recognise that we have got things wrong in the past, and we still do now. And I think part of moving forward is to acknowledge that. And that's why I was very keen to recognise that policing has a history of discrimination around Black and ethnic minority communities, and it's not fixed now. But actually, there's a really strong commitment, and I think, the work we're doing around our use of force, the work we're doing around stop search, the work we're doing around recruitment, the work we're doing about behaviours and standards in the force, the work we're trying to do, I think, nationally, because I also lead on some of the work around race, and you may have seen that, we've just appointed an independent oversight, kind of arrangement for policing to look at how it improves on race. So there is a lot of stuff to do we'll get into, but I think what are the truths I accept? I accept there is a history of discrimination, societally and with policing in the past. I accept that policing and police officers, despite their good intent, police a very unequal society. I accept we have the attitudes and approaches and a predominant view of the world that is white and male, and that has a different impact in how we interact. And parts of that are changing in policing, but it's not changing fast enough about race. And what we have to do, I think, is ensure that we can consistently demonstrate to the public how we are getting fairer of what we do and how we are an actively anti-racist organisation, which is what I believe we are. But we certainly aren't perfect.
Okay, I appreciate that's a lot to digest. I think as well, kind of what you said, obviously, me being honest again, you've kind of recognised a lot of the issues that are there, but it's clear for everyone to see. We've got to that kind of stage in society now when it's obvious it's not equal. Looking at history, let's say in terms of America as well, I know I could speak for Beresford, I could speak for Ryan. As people, all we've really wanted, let's be honest, is equal rights from a get-go. Tried civil rights, human rights. You can look back to history and see what has happened in terms of these bases. We've lost figures as people. You, as kind of a brand and heading up a brand of police, are pivotal in society. There's no two ways about it. You have the power to change it. You're the biggest kind of, when we talk about legitimacy, it's kind of us putting faith in terms of your hands and for you to control society. But when consistently there's disproportionality. I think, yeah, as I said, I appreciate you coming out and you speaking, and you said this is what it is, and as often others haven't already. But for me, it comes back to the narrative of, I kind of said it to Rich North as well, to be fair, if we get on, he's been supporting the mission. And I said to him, yeah, Rich, you're supporting it, but I can't praise a fish for swimming. We're at the point now where more needs to be done. And arguably, it needs to be done now. And I know it's not easy to change around years of kind of an impact and societal changes and kind of fix it at the click of a fingers or a drop of a hat. But for people that are listening right now, I'm kind of worried personally that my kids, I've not got kids yet, but my kids are going to be facing the same problems. And now when we've had these kind of monthly events, it's people before me are saying, hold up, we've been saying this for years.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer is, but that's, arguably it's not my role to, but it's kind of,
sure.
I know people have mentioned training as well in the chat. To be fair, to Bushra is in here as well, Suki and Richard North, we had the opportunity to do some of the training. Are these things that we can push forward? I know Beresford's got more ideas, but kind of running this course, how do we go about seeing this change? Because really it takes a collaborative effort, because clearly the answer hasn't been found yet.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, so I suppose I'd kind of say, I think a few bits around, I guess, what. So I'm going to come slightly from the position, I think, to start with, of where police officers feel, because there's something in this space where we've got to find a way of empathizing with each other. And I would say, as the professionals and the paid public servants, our empathy has to be the most amplified in this. And so one of the challenges, I think, if you look at the year policing's had with enforcing COVID, it's not very popular legislation. People don't like it. Nobody likes to be told they can't do some of the things we can do. One of the real challenges, I think, for the police is if the police feel under attack, police officers feel under attack, they feel criticised a lot of the time, they feel defensive. So if my approach to my organisation is to constantly make them feel defensive, make them feel under attack, particularly at a time, if you look at things like assaults on officers, where that's higher. If you look at, we've just had 2 very young officers where we've just charged 2 people with attempting to kill them in West Bromwich Town Centre recently. You know, so it's very important for me that what we don't do is, in this journey of trying to enlighten and change the way we are, that the answer is not to make my officers feel defensive, because they will, and we've seen this in the States, they'll retreat from interactions that are controversial. They'll back away from things that look a little bit tricky because they're worried about the lens and the optic, what will happen. So to deliver the change I've got to do, I've got to get to a point where a growing and more people realise that the change, and you'll hear the other people in the force, but we did a lot of stuff in the organisation, I think, when George Floyd happened, to open the conversations where our own staff and people told us what it felt like. The sessions you guided with Rich North, something, you know, when I was a chief super back in Moss Side in Manchester years and years ago, we did something called trading places, where young people searched the police, and the police found out what it was like to be searched, because you forget. And young people also had to do the stuff the police did on the other side to understand why the police were asking them all these questions. And we managed to build empathy around that. So as COVID opens up, you know, in terms of solution, I think we need to do more of that, because let's be really honest, a lot of our young people, and I was exactly the same as this when I joined the police at 21. I knew almost no black people when I joined the police. The first time I dealt with black people was policing communities. And as a result, you know, I didn't have friends, I didn't know people in the community. The cops often deal with the difficult sides of life. It is very easy to form polarized views of the society and communities you deal with. And, you know, last weekend on Saturday, we did, and the neighbourhood team in Aston did an event in the park in Newtown, where they leafleted all the communities in Newtown. They said, we're going to be in the park and we're going to do stuff for the day because we want you to come and use the park because it's safe. And people came in droves and interacted. And actually, you know, for a lot of our cops, for example, they would see Newtown as a difficult and bad area. But actually, everybody who I saw were lovely family members who wanted to chat to us all the day and have a good time. And so breaking down this view of each other, I think, is important. The second thing, though, I think, is demonstrating to us that we're not getting it right really well. So I am going to say more in a few weeks, because as you probably were, we've had an officer convicted of assault in Birmingham, which is the office. The way the process works is I have to hold a formal misconduct hearing to decide whether the officer should be dismissed or not, and that's why I can't get into conversations. There's a legal issue around that. But what I would say is that I know from the community, they will regard some of what they have seen as the tip of the iceberg of their experiences of the police. And conversation certainly won't be with our organisation. This is just about a bad apple. It's clearly about somebody who's behaved criminally. That's not where officers are. But we know from looking at things like use of force, we know looking at things like that actually there are areas where we are less empathetic. We don't communicate quite as well. We use force more frequently in terms of black people than I think we should be. And I think we've got to use these points of reflection of force. So I think what I would say in terms of change is, it'd be interesting in terms of colleagues is, it's a really bad idea to keep, if people feel the answer is to keep beating police officers and say, you're getting it wrong, you're getting it wrong, getting it wrong, because I think people will back away from policing communities, and that's dangerous for us. It also makes people defensive. I've tried really hard in the discussions we had in the organisation to confront why we're not getting it right, and use moments, frankly, where we're not getting it right, to be really honest with ourselves. Because my job as the chief is sometimes to stand up for my officers, and sometimes it's to stand up for the community and say we're getting it wrong. And I think it's to put in place the types of things that you've done in terms of training, but also processes. So today, when we do SOP searches, we know 95% of those are on body cam and we can review them. When we use force, they're on body cam. We actually review all our use of forces. So we are doing quite a lot in this space. And I intend to say more about it the next few weeks. But I guess I guess some of the perspective I'd say about change and how I think we're trying to do it in a way that makes more people in the organisation engage with this.
Dave, hi, Dave. It's Beresford.
Hi, Beresford.
Yeah, good to see you. And again, thank you for joining us today. And I really agree with everything that you've said around changing perceptions. And you will probably know that I've been around this agenda for a very, very long time, from when we were BRGV and before that. But we have to start to think about, there's some brilliant cops on this platform. And we as a community, and I'm not just talking about black community now, because it's quite, the issues are systemic and they're institutional, and we understand that. This is well documented. But if you look on this particular platform, people here are saying, actually, let's move away from that and look at how we can collaboratively work together to change the perceptions. So it's not about beating cops up. There are those people that will do that, but I think we've moved away that quite significantly now. And the fact that people like Rakeem and Bouncing Statistics, who it's fair to say that they would not ordinarily engage with police in the way that we're engaging. So for young, 18 to 25-year-olds to be engaging in this debate and also being part of the solution is a massive step forward. So it really isn't about beating cops up. If we think about the stop and search in principle, some of those guys that are doing stop and search, it's quite low level. They're looking for, people that are smoking small amounts of drugs, and therefore the outcomes for yourself are poor. We know that is well documented. And then when we look at the people that are being searched, it's disproportionate. So a lot of this is not really tying up, Dave. So we want to move forward and work alongside you to change this. And I think, as Rakeem has pointed out, it was the SUS laws when I was Rakeem's age. How is it now, still in 2022? And there are lots of other people, and we'll pull up some of those questions in a minute, that are asking the same questions. It's time for us to move on. It's the old rhetoric. So
if I'm not saying the conversation we have here is beating up the police, but I think there is a bit of a tendency, I think, more broadly. So if we look, we had a Home Affairs Select Committee report out the other day that is kind of, I think he's very good to point out the challenge, but we'd all recognise, and I do it around trying to say recruit more black officers, some of this is quite hard to do. But if I talk about the things that we are looking at doing, and actually the stop search one's a really good one. So here's a kind of controversial point. I'm not sure the answer will always be that search is proportionate, number one. because I told you we police in an unequal society. We search more young people than old people, don't we? If we begin to look at some of our search data, for example, in our most diverse neighbourhoods, actually we're proportionate in terms of the search we're doing, but we do more searching in those areas. So some of the answer to this is probably going to be better and fewer searches. And this is the area I think we've got to work through with the community, because one of the things I'm wrestling at the moment, and we are doing some experimenting, is this. So why do we search so much on drugs? Because finding the grounds for search on drugs is easier than it is to find the grounds to search for a knife, because you can identify the grounds to search. Some of those searches are absolutely, in my view, easier to justify than it would be to search for knives. My sense is, with something that's going on, most people in the community would like us to be very focused on searching around knives and violence. So we're generally searching in the right areas, probably searching too much, but we're definitely doing too much drug searching, in my view. And the debate, I'm having, I think, from ourselves is to say, generally speaking, most people take views, for example, Section 60 searches that are authorised are a bad thing for communities. But actually, would it be a better thing for communities if we agreed the areas where we should be doing the searching on knives? We agreed when that should happen, when the Section 60 is in. And that we actually tell officers they are not to search for drugs in that way, and they're to switch the searching under Section 60, because they get the authority then on knives, provided we're clear when and how. And I think some of these debates we are having is, back to your point, we want the police to be effective intervening around knife crime. We want the police to be intervening to stop violence. Sometimes the way we use our powers to intervene cause more damage, and I think this is the case with the drug searching. And as you probably know, I've also made comments. We work really hard not to criminalise young people when we find small amounts of drugs on them. So I think the trick in this is, exactly as you say, it's the engagement, because I think we are going to have to, you look at my position, change some of our policy and approach. But if I said to the community, I'm going to do loads more Section 60 searches, bluntly, people would go, crikey, why would you do that? But if the trade-off is right place, right location, we can show you why you do it, it will minimise the drug searching on young people who are not involved in violence. I think some of those things could be the way that we start to switch this across at a policy level. And actually, that's some stuff we're starting to work through and pilot now in the force.
Okay, Rakeem, I'm going to go to some of the questions in the chat, if that's all right.
Yeah,
and again,
perfect.
it's the serve and protect bit that I think we're all agreed on.
Yeah.
So, Elizabeth, I'm going to come to you first. You're raising an issue about police attitudes, and then I'm going to go to Dawn next, who's talking about training. And Elizabeth, if you can wrap yours up in Sue. So thank you for joining us, Elizabeth. Can you ask your question to David, please? Elizabeth?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I can hear you.
Yeah, I just think we need to see better, better, maybe assessing the situation better and not just, using force on people, on innocent people.
So have you got an example of that you talk about, or any experience you draw on there, Elizabeth?
No, but like when we see on the news, or when people obviously express their views and opinions on their experiences, then obviously it's hard to, hear what people have been through and dealt with, really.
Yeah, so I don't, again, I'll play in, I think, from the side when I was a cop and other cops do, police officers, when we call them, they turn up in situations where things are very ambiguous. People are very often emotional and heated. And one of the things the police have to do is try and make sense of that in a way and make some decisions. And actually, we have to take control and sometimes be assertive around that. And sometimes people will interpret why or the experience of that. And I think that's a challenging job. Now, no question, I think I've said to you on occasions, we can see on our use of force that actually on occasions that we don't get that right, and some people don't get that right. I've told you this week we've had a police officer convicted of assaulting people. So there are examples where that is not right as well. But I think we've also got to step back a little bit and recognise actually that, you know, if we haven't got direct experience, we've not seen some things as well. We, you know, what's our actual experience of it? What's our actual interaction with the police officers? You know, it is very difficult for me to counter a narrative where people say, well, this is what happens. I see it on television. I kind of see clips of videos that, you know, that there are a lot of interactions we have as a force that I think we do really well. And in this online world where there's lots of philosophy, there's lots of stuff on Twitter, you probably see on occasion sometimes we'll come out and try and correct some selective images because we've seen the body cam footage. Because again, in most of the searches we do, in most of the occasions where there's force use, we've actually got a body cam recording. We can't just publish that always because it involves other people's privacy. So I suppose the bit I would say is this: I don't for a moment pretend that we don't get things right. I don't wrong. I don't pretend for a moment sometimes we're not empathetic. I absolutely can point to an example we've had a police officer convicted of getting it wrong. But I also do think that we need sometimes just on occasions to look at the stuff we see online and step back and ask the question that there may be another side of the story to this as well. And what is online is not always true.
Okay. Richard Cox, just on support of that point really around body worn video, did you want to make your comment now?
Thanks, Barry. It was just a comment regarding what the boss has spoken about regarding stop search and use of video. So I've got a meeting on Monday with our legal services to discuss a pilot which we are looking to run within force response on one area, probably within the Birmingham area, regarding a pilot to entitle the person who is stop searched within a 28-day period to view the body-worn video of their stop search with an officer of an inspector rank. The rationale there being to be transparent, be open, and to allow the person who was stop searched to have a conversation with an officer who wasn't the officer that searched them about why that stop search happened, and to allow them to view their interaction with the police officers. Now, clearly, there's a lot of work around that, and the logistics around that are quite a challenge. Part of that, though, is to allow the officer or the inspector to then feed back to the officer who did the search to close the loop, if that makes sense. So if there's some good feedback, if there's some negative feedback, so then that officer can reflect upon their actions based on the feedback from the member of the public who was stop searched. It's a pilot that's within its early days. We are exploring the possibility of it. Mr. North or Mr. Foster will ultimately be the ones that agree whether the pilot will go ahead. But it's just something that I think is relevant for us to explore, so we remain open and transparent. And as I say, the key thing for me is to allow the person who gets stop searched a voice, and secondly, to allow us to give feedback to close the loop to the officer who did the stop search if there's anything that is positive or negative that we can feedback, if that makes sense.
Also, Richard, I just wanted to add to that, 2 seconds, Beresford, because I know that similar to that, I know Suki's piloting her QR code as well. But I think it goes without saying, I know you recognise the bias as well, and this kind of, I like to call it prejudiced nature. What I will see and what yourself will see, Richard, are two different things. How Dave, you may see a video and think it's okay. I'm going to see something the polar opposite. So when Lizzie's talking about some of these issues, yeah, we can say it's what we see on the news. You've got to take it with a pinch of salt. But I can look left and right. I can speak to all of my friends, and there's been many miscounters and bad judgments.
Totally. Yeah, I suppose I don't pretend there aren't examples and people can't draw examples. I know that's the case, and I suppose the challenge we've got though. So Rich has given an example of what we want to do on the stop search and show the video. What I didn't mention before is we're going to do some surveying of people we've used force on. To say, okay, we used force on you. Did you understand why we used it? Do you have a view on the force that was used? After we use force on you, how do we treat you and deal with you? Because actually, sometimes we all recognise there's a moment where it's all get heated, but then are we empathetic and deal with things afterwards? So this feedback piece we're trying to get and work through. But also back to the video, I suppose the bit I'm trying to get through about this is I absolutely get we see optics. I absolutely get on occasions people will say, I didn't like how I was treated, I felt was treated unfairly, etc. I suppose that this is the challenge with police is we're trying to make the police as fair as we possibly can be in what are quite difficult jobs they do that will never please everybody and are in quite an unequal society. And so, I think we're the only force in the country that's asking people we've used a baton on, what did you think about us? I think we're trying to open up the information around it. And we're doing that not because I can say, well, that's going to fix it straight away. And it's not going to put right your stories. And plenty of people will be able to come back to me examples where we don't get it right. But I think those are things we're trying to do to move this on. And clearly, the stuff we want to involve the community in to make sure we do get it right.
I think what you said there is key. I think, as I said, the thing for me as well as we noticed the engagement's what's key. I know we had the opportunity to do the training. Kind of when we got the data back, everyone, the officers themselves knew the importance of perceptions more, better suited to making partnerships with the communities, thought of ways, I've got the data in front of me, thought of ways to make a difference throughout their community and a further insight into communities' feelings. My issue of me wanting to be a part of this change, everybody on here wanting to be a part of this change, I found, even I could know Michelle's going to speak later, she's trying to help with mental health. There's a lot of professionals on here that know their communities best. And we're all saying we want to help and aid the training. For example, Richard automatically said, you know what, I've seen it, loved it, want to roll it out. But then are there the resources for people like ourselves to get involved? So for me, if there's not resources, do we really want to make these changes? And these are kind of questions I pose to yourself, really.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the question means what the resources. I mean, is there a commitment? Is there a desire to do this? Does involving the community in these things, is it absolutely intrinsic to get it right? Well, if we don't involve the public in it, if we don't involve young black guys, largely because that's where a lot of the interaction is in this, how are we ever going to understand each other? How are we ever going to drive empathy for each other and understand each other's roles? How are we ever going to kind of break across those, those lines? And, we just piloted the other week, for example, summer academy aimed at young black people at one of the schools that we're going to roll out again over the summer, aimed at young black people to come and see what do police do and inside policing. And that is, I hope, good for young people to understand what the police do, but it's really good for us to interact with more young black people in an environment that's not at a job or an incident. So, I think that support's there for the guys. I know Rich, Ed and Rich North are really progressive on this stuff. Actually, a lot of this work is about response officers, fire officers, the people who turn up at moments of criticality. Because actually, I think a lot of the work with neighbourhood officers, I think, they're more embedded in the community. I think the links are stronger. It is often our really busy officers who turn up at these incidents where I think that lack of understanding and empathy is there. So, for me, I think this is the most important issue we've got to wrestle with. And we've got to build that trust and legitimacy. So, the support for this, for me, is absolutely totally there.
Yeah. I think that's a great segue to Kenny, who was talking about relationships, and he's talking about backgrounds and race. Kenny, if you're there, can you unmute yourself and make your point, please?
Yeah, it was just one of the things I seem to see is the media doesn't seem to help with the relationship between police forces and local communities. The way things are portrayed, people are going to take it as you take it. Not everyone, as Rakeem said, a lot of people, you have to take it with a pinch of salt, but a lot of people won't. And I think an improvement needs to be made with face-to-face, more face-to-face connections with the police forces themselves and the communities, and maybe even a bit more training and guidance with regards to racial profiling, so that it builds up the trust between the police and the public. And surely that can lead us to a bit more of an equal society, as it should be. That was just the point I was.
I mean, I think for my part, thanks, Kenny, for the observation. I think COVID has been really, really difficult during this phase for the interactions. We've all, I mean, tonight's one of the strengths of what we learn, isn't it? We can come together and have a conversation online. We can get a lot of value. We can get a lot of people together without all having to travel. But actually, there is no replacement face-to-face, and we have become more distant. I mean, even inside the force, I haven't sat in a room with my top leaders of the force since the pandemic began. We've all had to work to some level remotely in the work we do. I think the reason and I think Raheem challenged me on this. I'm not saying if you see it in the papers, take it with a pinch of salt. In the papers this week, you saw an officer convicted of assaulting 2 young black men. That's absolutely true. I'm not ducking from this. I think the challenge is that we live in this, online 24/7 world that my messages can't compete with as fast. So if something happens, everybody will see it. And actually, I'll guarantee you my message will, after I've looked at the body cam footage, reviewed it, done this, done that, the other, spoke to the IOPC, they've decided to look at it, whatever. I'll probably get my officer's version of the world out on that, probably in about 6 months. And I think it's really tricky for us because, do you know what? Sometimes we are in the wrong. And I think when we are in the wrong, I mean, a good example, you probably saw the interaction we had during COVID with the young guy in Dorridge. We were absolutely in the wrong. And within 4 or 5 hours, we were able to come out and really be clear when we'd seen all the footage. We're totally in the wrong. We're totally to blame. It's totally unacceptable. So I think we come out when we're in the wrong. But sometimes, you know what? Sometimes I think my guys are in the right, actually. And it's not as easy to get that out quickly sometimes as well. So, the trouble for that is, it is an environment where people trust less. In the world or in the digital world, there is less trust. There's a lot of research in societies. It's not just this country. It's not just this place. Democratic societies, because of social media, because of information, we trust less. And I think we are operating in an environment where there is less trust available. And that's why we've got to do more at a human level. Because, my personal sense is the closer we get people to policing, the more they find that police officers are actually just like them. And actually hearing each other's stories really helps build that level of trust. So you face-to-face stuff spot on.
A quick point from Dawn. The police refuse to accept that being stopped and searched is traumatic. Why would anyone want to revisit that experience? Another police officer. They shouldn't be unfairly stopped and searched in the first place. The policies are ridiculous.
So I think it's traumatic. I don't think anybody likes it. When, the cops will know this in the chats. The first time you search anybody, you're as nervous as hell. You don't know where to put your hands. You're really uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable thing. When you've done your 150th, you're not quite as uncomfortable on our end. And you can forget it. And the reason why I think this experience of cops experience being searched is really important, because we've got to be, I think, sometimes empathetic about that. It's not a routine thing. When you're searched, it feels pretty, personal. It doesn't matter if it's the 250th search I've done in my career. So that's there. I don't think anybody should feel they're unlawfully searched and should be unlawfully searched. And I think we look and challenge those. I think the debate I've said today is kind of think we're doing too much drug searching, and I'd like us to be demonstrably being seen to do more searching in areas where we have knife crimes and stabbings to show it's for knives and not for drugs, because I think it's not doing us any harm. But being searched is very, very intrusive.
Okay. There's a question here, and again, it's complementary to bouncing statistics, of which I'm a fan. Once the 6 sessions have been completed, which is due to end in October, will we still be working alongside bouncing statistics? And that's come from, I don't know who that is. But anyway, yeah, it's a great question, because the likelihood is, and it's a resource question, we get to the end of the 6 sessions in October, and this has been a very, very invaluable debate and shows the kind of relationships that we should be having with the police, and then nothing for the next however long.
So Ed might be a better place for that, because obviously you guys in response have been doing some of this work, haven't you, rather than me. Do you want to kind of set the context where we're going? Because clearly, I guess at some stage you're probably going to be coming out with a view on where you want to go with this work.
Yeah, we'll do. So we originally, through Beresford and the team, arranged 6 sessions. We've done, I think, 4 now, so we've got a couple left. They've been really useful. Any opportunity, like we've said, and COVID has brought this upon us, anytime we can get together with 40, 50 members of the community like this on a Friday and have an engagement and get your view is absolutely brilliant for us. I know the big push from you guys is what action do we take and how quick can we do that action? And we've had the conversations at the previous meetings about sometimes this is national policy and we can't influence things instantly. However, I think at the end of it, what I've always said is, myself and Richard North have had a discussion, we need to look at how we can capitalise on it. So we've got the current, what we'll call scrutiny panels that operate at each MPU. So we've got 8 of those running, which run on a monthly basis, and I know Natalie's online who supports that. So we've got that runs in local areas, but I'm conscious that from our perspective, so myself, Richard Cox, Richard North, and I know Suki's on the call as well, and other officers, we're more than happy to keep doing this in whatever platform we want, but we're very conscious that as the police, we're very keen to take over, set agendas and get things done. And this isn't my meeting or Mr. Thompson's meeting, this is your meeting. So we kind of come and do what you want us to do. So in some ways, Rich North and I have tried not to be pushy and kind of, you steer us in the direction you want. You tell us what you want us to do and we'll deliver it. But we're always happy to come along. As you know, we've been here for the last few months doing this and present whatever you want. Like tonight, Scott's going to talk about mental health. Last month, I did the statistics and where we are with the disproportionality. I know Rich has presented before. So we're happy to keep it going. It's just in what that looks like is down to you guys. We don't want to take over and it be a police thing. It's a community thing that we attend. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ed. And again, I think it's really good for, I think myself and Rakeem and the rest of the team are confident in that, but I think it's really good for the wider community to hear that as well. So thank you for sharing that. We're keen to deal with the representation part of this debate before we go to mental health. I just wondered if Karen Gettys was with us. I can't see her in the participation. Are you there, Karen? If you are, we want to bring you in just to share, what it is in terms of being quite a senior officer as a black woman in the force. Are you there, Karen? That pause suggests no.
I do think I saw her, to be honest. Maybe she's hiding from us.
Oh, okay. It's saying she's not. She's not. Okay. Rakeem, maybe we should go to the mental health then. And then if Karen does jump on, we can continue. Is that okay?
It's fine with me. Perfect.
Yeah. You want to make the link, or do you want me to do it?
I'll leave it with you. Leave it in your hands.
Okay, we got one of your senior officers. I'm forgetting his name at the moment.
Scott McGarrigle is very good.
Thank you.
You'll struggle to spell the surname. It's Scott McGarrigle.
Scott McGarrigle. Really, he leads up on mental health within the force. And I'm a fan of what he's about to say because I was around at the early part of mental health triage, and most of the community still are not aware that we have a fantastic place of safety within the city, which shortly means most people who get stopped on the street who have got a mental health condition, a known mental health condition, would not go to police custody in the way that they used to. And that comes out some work that we did around Mikey Powell and a good colleague of mine called Tipper Naphtali. And we've moved, several years since then, and it's probably about 10 years on. But I'm aware that the community is not aware of that. So it's really good to have Scott with us. And Scott, if you could really start to talk about the whole place of safety, the mental health triage and what fantastic work that they're doing, because I think this should be one of the things that we should be promoting amongst the community, because that would help to change some of the perceptions. So over to you, Scott.
Thanks very much, Berford. And thanks very much for inviting me here tonight. I've never really had the opportunity to speak to this group before. So it's certainly useful for me just to bring...
Karen Gettys.
Oh.
I think that's Karen, is it?
Hello?
Shall I carry on?
Yeah, please, Scott. Yeah, sorry for the interruptions.
So I just want to talk about three things primarily tonight. So Section 136, which is the power that police officers use when they interact with somebody in the community who's mentally unwell. The mental health triage car itself, and where we're going with mental health, which is the mental health tactical advisor role, which you may have heard about. So first of all, I think it's important just to understand the sort of context that we operate in and where we've come from. So the legislation that police officers have to use is around the Mental Health Act 1983. So we're actually dealing with legislation which is almost 40 years old, dealing with a problem which is very different now compared compared to what it was back then. So, I mean, when I joined as a cop 20 years ago, back in 2001, it was very rare for us to detain people under Section 136 of the Mental Health Act. And when we did, people were acutely unwell. You know, it was the sort of people that, you know, didn't have any sort of mental capacity at all, were walking down the street, running in and out of cars, you know, not able to hold a conversation with you. It was a unique event. I would say as a constable for 5 years, I probably used that power 4, maybe 5 times in that 5 years. Fast forward to 2021, you know, and we've used Section 136 about 1,700 times in 2020, and that's down on 2019 because of the pandemic. So why do we use Section 136 so much? That kind of leads me into the triage car. But moving back to 2010, we started to see the use of 136 increase from about 2010. And the main reason behind that is that we've had, you know, across the UK, a reduction of mental health beds within the NHS of about 25 to 40% in 10 years. We're starting to see the numbers increase slightly now, but over that period, about 25 to 40%. In Birmingham, I think it was about 25%. Now, the reason that we started to see a huge reduction in beds from the 1980s and 1990s was because there was more of an emphasis on care in the community. So we were trying to get rid of the old asylums, the old institutions where people were put in and just forgotten about and locked away for life. There was a greater emphasis on care in the community. So come 2010, you know, we had the huge financial crash in 2008, and then the cuts that started to come in from 2010, and that affected every part of the public sector, including mental health services within the NHS. So we saw bed reductions, we saw staff reductions, just like we saw with police as well. We saw police number reductions as well. But we started to see Section 136 creep up. And we started to think, well, why is that happening? Why are more people going into mental health crisis in the community outside of the hospitals? So it was we didn't really have the answers at that point, but what we knew was that cops were using 136 a lot more, which took us to 2013 and the Home Office pilot, which started. They chose about 9 or 10 areas within England and Wales, I think it was, and there was some money given to mental health trusts and police forces to come up with a solution to combat this increase in Section 136. Now, West Midlands Police was the first force to have a tripartite model to address public place crisis. So we had police officers, a paramedic, and also a psychiatric nurse that would go about in an ambulance, run about Birmingham and Solihull and deal with people who were mentally unwell in the street. And that was why it got the name street triage. Now that car is still in existence now, 7 years on. But what we realized fairly quickly once that car came into effect, and this was replicated across the rest of the UK as well, you know, for the forces that had triage cars or quasi equivalent, was that they were actually starting to become involved in dealing with mental health crisis off the street as well. So pretty soon after we started, we realized that actually about 60 to 70% of the time, the mental health street triage car was inside people's houses, people who were in mental health crisis. Now, if I've got a leaky tap, I'll phone a plumber, you know, or if I've got broken floorboards, I'll phone a joiner. So why is it that West Midlands Police, 60% of its mental health demand is crisis incidents? People phoning us up saying, I feel suicidal, I need you to come and help me. Or partner agencies asking us to go out on their behalf to deal with people who are mentally unwell. You know, we're not clinicians. We are legal professionals. So why is it that police is so heavily involved in mental health? You know, and this is something that was recognised in the HMIC report, picking up the pieces that was released in November 2018. You know, the police service has become the de facto emergency response for mental health. Now, there's a number of fundamental reasons as to why that's the case, and some of them aren't very well known by communities. So if you look at, you know, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE, they have set mental health services a 4-hour target to respond to people who are mentally unwell in their homes. 4 hours. Now, if someone phones West Midlands Police up and says, I'm going to kill myself and I'm going to do it now, we will respond within 15 minutes. So straight away, you can see there's some disparity there. You know, we're going to send police officers who, you know, albeit we have some training in how to deal with people who are mentally unwell, we're not clinicians. You know, we can't assess that individual. We can't offer them options. All we can do is try and make them comfortable if they want us in their home. But this is what we see. We see people phoning the police when they're mentally unwell or when they want support. So, you know, our involvement in the street triage car has kind of served the purpose, I think. You know, in the first few years that we did it, we learned, you know, a hell of a lot about how to deal more effectively with mental health in the community. But ultimately, when you look at the face of it, why are we introducing police officers into people's homes who are mentally unwell? You know, I'm a cop, I don't think that's right. Now, if any of my children were mentally unwell, I wouldn't want the police outside, because there is that stigma of criminality attached to police officers when they come to your home, regardless of what it's for. You know, I've spoken to service users of the triage car, and there's two chains of thought. One, I really like it when triage turn up because I know they will help me. And then the second opposing view is, I felt like I was treated like a criminal. You know, the police officers put me in the back of the car in front of everybody. I didn't want that. But unfortunately, that is, you know, that is our default crisis response with the triage car. But the West Midlands Police is withdrawing from, I say withdrawing, we are moving away from working on the triage ambulance from about December this year, because, you know, what I want us to do is to separate the legal aspect of dealing with mental health from the clinical aspect of it. We don't need to be involved in that clinical aspect. We just need to be there when we need to be there. And our role around mental health is really specific under the Mental Health Act. We deal with people who are mentally unwell on the street to protect them and to protect others. That's where Section 136 comes in. So going back to the analogy about somebody running in and out of cars and so forth, you know, we would detain that individual and we would take them to the place of safety. Or we have, you know, Section 18 of the Mental Health Act, which is detaining people who have escaped from a hospital, you know, people who are so mentally unwell that they need to be detained against their will. We can return them to hospital. So, you know, we're taking a much more different stance now around mental health. And in January 2020, we completely revamped our mental health policy, and we now have 9 guidance documents that give detail around the 9 most common scenarios that West Midlands Police will be involved in around mental health. And those documents include guidance for partners. So, for example, you know, Birmingham City Council, Forward Thinking Birmingham, Birmingham Solihull Mental Health Trust, around what our offer is around mental health. So, prime example of that would be, you know, if somebody says, you know, such and such hasn't turned up for an appointment, we haven't seen them this morning, can you go around there and do a safe and well on them? You know, and that's a term you've maybe heard before, safe and well. Well, in terms of, you know, a clinical response, a police officer can't say if somebody's safe. And we can't say that they're well because, you know, we're not qualified to say that they're mentally well. What we can say is they're there, they're alive, and, you know, they're breathing at the end of the day. But that doesn't achieve the ultimate goal. So what we now say is, you know, if you've got a concern for someone at their address, we will attend with you. We will not attend on your behalf. We will go on your behalf if you think that person's dead or dying on the other side of that door. So we're being really specific about what we do now, because ultimately the needs and the dignity of the public of Birmingham is at the heart of everything we do around mental health. That is the strapline that we have in our document. We really needed to put a clear vision around what we were going to do with mental health from January 2020 moving forward. So all of our officers have been trained in those documents, and we're creating this new branch of officers and staff. I touched on it earlier about mental health tactical advisors. So as we step back from the triage car, we will create these mental health tactical advisors who will undertake a 3-day training course around these documents and associated legislation and national guidance, so they can support decision makers on the front line, whether that's the response officers in the 999 cars, whether it's you know, our force support unit officers who are, you know, watching somebody at a mental health suite under section 136, for example, to the local authority who need to execute a mental health act warrant. So we will have cops who will make sure that we are operating within a legal framework at all times. Because in the past, we've helped partners and we've helped the public at times that we probably shouldn't have. We've been overexposed in some areas and under-involved in others. And this policy that we have now and the support and guidance documents will support us, you know, quite a long way in redressing that that balance. So I've covered quite a bit there. I don't know if there's any questions.
First of all, Scott, thank you. I mean, I have to admit I was a little bit worried when you said you were moving away, because I know how effective that has been over the years. But actually, if you're suggesting that we're going to have, I think you call them task advisors, that's quite encouraging in terms of what that means. And I think if you could just explain when we talk about triage and the fact that the police were going out with clinical staff, I think that will just help from an operational point of view so that people understand that.
Sure. So the triage car was set up to try and reduce the amount of section 136s that were being undertaken, but it was accepted that there may still need to be a need to use 136, and that was why the police was a constituent part of that triage car.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, you know, in 7 years, it's consistently been shown that police officers will use that power on the triage car about 6% of the time. So a lot of the time, the cops are there just in case. And we can't really afford to do that anymore, if that makes sense. And it's not appropriate to do that because we're unnecessarily introducing policing into the clinical response. You know, we've seen enough cases over the years where police really shouldn't have been involved in the clinical response, such as the inquest into the death of Sasha Forster, where the even mention of the term police was enough to make that girl run outside and commit suicide. You know, so we're unnecessarily introducing police into that clinical space. But when I say we're coming out of triage, you know, that's not us saying cheerio. That's about us actually saying, and we've said this to Birmingham Solihull Mental Health Trust, we still want to co-house with you. We want to work in the same office so that we can continue to share information, so that we have a, you know, we continue to have that common operating picture, which has been really, really useful over the last 7 years, so that we can assess threat and risk properly and make sure that Birmingham Solihull Trust staff aren't at risk when they go into risky environments, and the ambulance service as well. I think it would be a step back if we all went our separate ways. I do think there needs to be a continuing mental health ambulance, if you like, that provides that quick response to crisis in the community. I just don't think the police should be part of that. I think we need to be much more focused on what our response is rather than being there all the time. So it's just not appropriate.
Brilliant. And again, thank you for that. That's been excellent. And again, we still need to promote what you're doing. And we're moving on only because we've got 2 questions in relation to that. Michelle, and I'm going to go to Kenny, and then Karen's joined us. Superintendent Karen Gettys is with us now, and then I think we're going to go to that at the end. So, Michelle, if you can just pose your question, and then also Kenny in relation to Scott's presentation, and then we'll go to Karen. If that's okay.
I think it was about training. So someone mentioned earlier just about training, and I was saying that I felt that our local forces should actually seek support in terms of training from local communities. One, it just gives that context just in terms of culture, community. A lot of like grassroots organisations do a lot of work. Myself, I'm a therapeutic practitioner. I'm a mental health first aid trainer. I'm also associate trainer with mental health first aid. There's a lot of value that you could get in terms of training from an organisation like ours, rather than going to a corporate that doesn't have the context of the community. I've got connections with the local trust, and I've worked quite closely with the police for a number of years because of interactions with our loved ones around mental health. So is there, or are there any initiatives where you are actually working with a local community grassroots organisations so that your officers not only get the mental health training, but also the cultural context which is needed when our loved ones are in crisis in the community?
Thanks, Michelle.
We have done quite a lot of work with partners around training. The problem I think we have is that, certainly for the front line where mental health is most impacted, you know, we're talking about training 1,200 cops there. And that's really difficult to achieve. You know, about 3 years ago, we had everyone down to Tally Ho, and we had some guest speakers who were service users who'd been in crisis come out the other side and decided to share their experiences with us. And certainly the experience I've had is that, you know, when you have sit-down training, it's good and it sticks in there for a few months, but, you know, 12 months, 18 months down the line, you kind of need a refresher. And my principal concern around that is that because the breadth of work and knowledge that cops have got to have these days, believe me, it's double what I had to know when I joined in 2001. It's really, really difficult to achieve that. So rather than having that broad base trained on a regular basis, you know, I mentioned the picking up the pieces report earlier, where the College of Policing had suggested that every force should have a 2-day training course for cops. I mean, that was a figure that was plucked out of thin air pretty much. You know, it could have been 2 days, it could have been 3 days, it could have been 1 day. But our thinking is that if we have about 150 to 200 cops who know a hell of a lot more than everybody else and could be classed as subject matter experts from a legal perspective, and they could advise their colleagues on the ground, then that would probably do better than training 1,250 on the ground. I do think, you know, we could do a bit better around the cultural sensitivities and so forth. What's difficult with mental health is that you're dealing with a scenario which is entirely unpredictable. So cops are always going to be far more risk averse and hands-on than they would be ordinarily with with the likes of a stop search. I mean, you just need to look at how the legislation is different between the Mental Health Act and the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. For example, in the Mental Health Act, if somebody is detained under Section 136 by the police, they can be searched at any point during that detention. And we can also search them out. Now, you can't do that in a stop search. and that's to recognise the challenge and the threat and risk and the unpredictability that's posed to the officers who undertake that. So I think I get what you're saying, Michelle. You know, I would always want us to become more acutely aware of cultural sensitivities and so forth. I think it would be useful to undertake training like that, but I do think cops sometimes necessarily, that tunnel vision when they're dealing with mental health, because we're dealing with such unpredictable people sometimes.
Okay, can I just respond?
Quickly, Michelle, because we need to go to Kenny as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think Richard mentioned previously, and I think you've just picked up the point that you'll have these tactical officers that will have the training, sort of speaking to people that are actually on the ground dealing with mental health. So what you're saying is that someone on the ground may have no mental health training at all, and someone that isn't actually seeing, sorry, am I wrong, Scott?
Yeah. So
this was picked up in a direct conversation with Richard previously. So I don't know if it's something different.
I don't know if Richard wants to, what I was just going to say, what you touched on there.
Not this one.
So the cops on the ground, they will have training around mental health. So all our new officers that come in to West Midlands Police receive a bit of an input from our triage car, just to give them a bit of an idea about sort of best practice and how to deal with people, you know, communication skills and so forth, a little bit around different types of mental health conditions and the presentations behind those. So we don't have cops who don't know anything about mental health that are out there. You know, everybody gets something. Right. I think there could be a bit more for new officers, and that's not necessarily from West Midlands Police, but nationally from the College of Policing. You know, we've been waiting 2 years for a mental health package to come out, which I've been consulted upon. It's not ready yet, but we really need something from, you know, from the national side really that we can give to the front line. We're certainly doing more than what some other forces are around mental health.
Okay. I'll send you a direct message, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott. That was excellent. And I think it was Richard North you were referring to, Michelle, who's not online today. So he's heading up the project with us. Just before we go to Karen to talk about the importance of inclusion, not only from a Black perspective, but from a woman's perspective, I think let's go to Kenny. Kenny, you were making a point. If you just want to raise your point quite quickly, that'd be really useful.
Yeah, I'll just be quite quick. I quite fully agree with you, Scott. I come from a background of having mental health problems in the past before, addiction problems, but I've been volunteering the past for quite a while now with Change Grow Live in Birmingham on a couple of different levels. And the stories that you hear with people's reactions to having that first responder be in the police, it can be a very scary challenge for a lot of people that deal with mental health, that are having mental health issues. I think it's good to have that step back. I think it's absolutely brilliant what you do. But I also see it as the pressures that the police force are being put under being that first responder kind of flips with, you know, you've got the pressures that the NHS are then under. So it's a kind of, it's a hard one, but I completely agree with what you're saying.
It's really difficult. I mean, at the end of the day, the ambulance service and the police service are picking up a lot of the slack around mental health, and that's because there's complete disparity between mental health and physical health services in the UK. And mental, you know, I might be speaking out of turn here, but mental health needs a lot more money put into it, because ultimately, if you think about how police will detain someone under 136, they'll go into a place of safety, they'll get admitted to a hospital, they'll get released home. That's where the problem is. They're not getting seen at home enough, which is why they go into the street, they get detained under 136, they go into hospital, and they get caught in this cycle. You know, and I can tell you my constables deal with the same people day in, day out in different parts of the West Midlands. And it's shameful. It's shameful because ultimately there is system-wide failure about how these people are treated. And what I can say, you know, we don't always, you know, as Mr. Thompson said, we don't always get it right. But I can tell you, in mental health, we are really trying our best. You know, we are not clinicians, we're police officers, but what we will do is we'll try and help people as best as we can in their time of need.
Once again, Scott, thanks very much for that. Really, really helpful, and it's, again, fantastic work. I can endorse that work because I've been really up close and personal with it, so thank you very much. We're going to go straight now. Rakeem, are you going to do this one, or do you want me to carry on, or are you?
To be honest, I'm feeling like a member of the audience. I'm enjoying the conversations here.
I just think the officers have done a really good job tonight, and let's go with that. So it's Superintendent Karen Gettys is up next, and again, she's going to talk to us from a woman's perspective and also an inclusion perspective. And then we're going to hand over to Rakeem at the end to wrap up, if that's all right, Rakeem.
Perfect.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Fabulous. Sorry about that. My mic dropped out, so hence the technical issues. First of all, I just want to wish my fellow JAs a happy Independence Day for today. Hope you're going to be out there celebrating tonight, but if you are, keep safe. And if my phone goes off in the background, I am on duty at work, so please accept my apologies if it does go off. So, as it's been said, my name is Karen Gettys, and as you can see, I'm a woman of colour and I'm a police officer. I have been in policing now for about 29 years. I retire in January. I know, you know, the black don't show the age, but, you know, I retire in January. And my journey into policing wasn't something that I woke up and I wanted to do. I just happened to be working in a KFC and I saw an ad in the paper that asked, could you? And I thought, yes, that's something I could do. I could go and I could be helpful and do a meaningful role for my community. So 29 years later, I'm here. And as I sit here today, I'm the highest ranking black female within West Midlands Police. Now, for me, that should be a moment of celebration. But on the other side, I question why in 2021, I happen to be the highest ranking female within policing. But I'll come to that around the disproportionality and representation in a moment. I just wanted to just highlight for me, being a black person of colour, being black female, there's 3 incidents that stand out in my head around when my race was highlighted to me. One, I used to live in Jamaica back in the days when I was much younger. And I remember a couple came to our village, and I have a twin brother, and they stopped us and wanted to take photographs because we were cute little black babies. And I was about 5 years old, and that stuck in my memory. That was the first time I was ever consciously aware of my colour. The other 2 times have been regarding being in policing. One was when I joined and I was at Brighton, and I was one of only 2 black females in college at that time, and about 400 officers. And when I say black, my sister was, as in not my blood sister, but my sister, she was of mixed ethnicity. So she was white, black colour. And she was a lighter skin tone than me. So I could tell the difference, and you in the court could tell the difference. But the commandant couldn't tell us apart. And we couldn't get in trouble because we know we stood out. So again, that was the moment. And the 3rd time when I felt really conscious of my colour was after the murder of George Floyd. And the impact that had on me, being a person of colour within my community and being a person of colour wearing the uniform, you know, was really, really profound. And I tell you this because I want you to understand that I do empathise and I do understand the conversations that's happening here, because I've driven up and down the street in my red Golf GTI, and I've been concerned about being stopped and how would I respond to being stopped. So I understand and I empathise, and I fully take on board the comments that have been said. I think some of the changes that have been since George Floyd has been really, really progressive in police, particularly within West Mids. I can only speak about West Mids. I think the first bit is finally an acknowledgement of a problem or an issue around how the police engage and interact. I think finally policing, and tonight is an example of that, a willingness to listen to difficult conversation and accept that we haven't always got it right. And there's my phone. I'll just turn it off 1 second. And I think the training and the willingness to learn about our history, talk about Jamaican Independence Day, and understanding the context about history, such as the riots, how that has informed our policing style, how that's the rationale behind why police don't trust us, has been more readily available at the forefront of training for not only officers that have been in my service, but also new officers coming in. I think we've already talked about the plans that have been placed around stop and search, investing in programs to raise the number of senior Black officers within the organisation. But one area that we still fail to see traction around is the representation around recruitment. I think as a force, we've been doing a lot to push recruitment. We do a lot with the positive action team. I know I've been out there engaged with Beresford and other people around selling policing as a profession, as a rewarding career and something that you can give back to our community. But for some reason, I sit here with about 5-6 months to go as one of less than 40 Black females within West Midlands Police. And I keep asking myself why. And when about leaving legacy, one of the things I will ask myself, one of the regrets is that representation hasn't improved significantly in the time that I've been in policing. And I'm just going back to the start of the conversation, and I think some of the challenges that was put towards Mr. Thompson was that the power to change is in his hand, and that we want to be collaborative, and that we know our community. And I sit here and I think everything that you said there is back, and the challenge that I put back to my community is around, you have the power to change what policing looks like. I think, I go back to George Floyd and how exposed a lot of our Black colleagues felt within the organisation, because, you turn the corner and you don't see somebody that looks like you. So there is a power within our own community to change who it is that's going out there and using stop and search, who is that responds to our call for service, who it is that's looking after our community. The collaborative aspect, again, there's an opportunity here to look at different ways around how we can influence this agenda. And ultimately, that powerful phrase, and I can't remember who said it on this call, we know our community. So when we talk about mental health and we talk about there's a cultural competence behind it, there's a way, there's no better person. There's a lot of good officers within the organisation, and the bosses already alluded to there are some bad apples as well. But for me, I think there's a power in seeing a Black person coming to service our own community. So as I sit here and I'm about to depart the door, I just put the question back to try and understand why we're not seeing that uplift in recruitment, really. Because I just sit here and I think, if not you, then who? Somebody has to do the job. Policing is not going to go away. It's going to be here. It's going to impact on our community. And I hope that we're not sitting here having the same conversation in 10 years' time. But I fear, unless as a community we become more receptive and start changing the narrative around disengaging with policing as a career, the people that will police our community will remain the same. White, Black, mainly heterosexual males. So if not you, then who? And
Perfect. Yeah, you give us all some motivation. I think also what I do believe as well, what you said about the George Floyd, that hit me, I know with other people as well. Because when I seen that, honestly speaking, I try not to get in my feelings on here, but when I did see that, it was a true reminder that I'm Black, people die because they look the same color as me. And yeah, it's not as bad as overseas, but we still sitting here and we have to have this conversation. When Karen's saying she's doing this, she said, you've got to those levels. I applaud you because you've stayed in there, you've trying to do the representation, you've kind of heart on the sleeve, you're doing it. I have to give you respect. But then as she just said, she's gone soon. So where's the next step? Now we're going backwards a step. And that's just the brutal honesty. Yeah, it's all good saying we need to try and get more Black kids involved. We've tried to appeal and reach out to some of the Black kids we work with, good little kids, good lads. But these are the same kids that are getting stopped. He doesn't even want to jump on a Zoom to go to talk about Hear My Voice. Never mind join the police. But one of the initiatives that we have got at the moment in terms of our group is working with schools. So we're creating workshops to build that link. I know that's funded by the PCC as well. Build that link between the pupils there and the police to see if we can drive that recruitment. Because me personally, I said it in the training when I came and Busher was there. And it was funny because everyone said, oh, we'll go around in the police car and we'll have a look at jobs. And I honestly point blank said, I'll drive in my own car, it's fine. And a couple of them took offense for it at first and I had to explain myself. Hence why I was saying I kind of respect Karen for what you're doing, because I feel as though you're a bigger person than me. I personally said, I can't be a part of what the brand actually stands for. If someone keeps attacking me, I can't join that. I wear Nikes because it says just do it. I love the brand. I love what it stands for. But for me to go and join this brand, I'm too far gone. So my part to play in this now is, can I help the next generation change? And I do believe, to kind of mirror what you said, Karen. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think you can help to change the brand. And part of that is being involved in designing the product. And 100%. At the moment, because we are sort of, we're disappearing from police, and I'm talking about Black people, the percentage is just ridiculous. And we can't, I know, the boss released the videos on there, and etc. We do get it wrong. We do get it wrong because sometimes we don't have the knowledge and the skill set to get it right. So we've got to change our careers, that mindset. And I did sort of commission, I've got a little children's book out there called In the Nick of Time, because I think you've got to start that conversation early within that. Our community has to lead on this and start to push and start to change the narrative to make sure that, we keep the next generation, that we don't lose them. Because if we don't start to harness that talent that's out there, we're going to sit here again in 10 years, and I'd love to talk to you in 10 years. I'm a bit grayer, but I'd love to be having a different conversation in 10 years and to see a Black chief constable. Sir, I'm not trying to get rid of you, but a Black chief constable within West Midlands Police. That is my vision. I have a dream.
100%. I think it's a powerful vision. I think it's one that I believe everyone in here kind of agrees with. Otherwise, they wouldn't take time out on a Friday night to be on here. It's kind of putting that into reality. Once again, I say it myself, got Rich Cox here. First of all, he was happy to jump on. Suki's been pushing, Bushra, Ifti, Ed's here. A lot of people are pushing the cause, but then it kind of upsets me sometimes because I question, is it enough? Is it ever going to be enough? And having even Dave, how you've come on today, and Scott speaking as well, it does fill me with confidence that there's an issue. We join as a collective to kind of change this problem. And I think the importance, as you said yourself, Karen, the community want to be a part of this change. And for me, the biggest thing when we've had our debriefing meetings, as Beresford can second as well, is can we not have substantial initiatives and projects created by your communities to push forward these changes? And as I said, I don't know from your experience as well, Karen, what you've seen, what do you believe could happen from the communities? I think she's on the phone actually, but we'll come back to her. So yeah, as I said, I've got no doubts that people aren't behind the mission, but I don't know how many are that are going to make that meaningful change. What was you going to say, Karen, as well? I feel like you're back.
So did you have a question for me then?
I was going to say, yeah.
I'm
so
back with you now.
of how do you reckon the community themselves, members on here, can make that change? If there's things they can take away from yourself, from your experience, what do you believe we can do?
So I think the conversation is great. I think having a chat is great. And I think the question was asked about what next for this group. I think part of that is policing needs to change. And I have no doubt that Mr. Thompson is very focused on ensuring that West Midlands changes. But I've got to say, my concern remains around the lack of visible representation within the organisation. Because if we don't have people coming in, the decision maker will never change. And we've got to have those roots planted early so that we can see people at my level within the organisation. I should not be the only Black female within West Mids at this rank. No way. But if we don't start getting invested as a community, that won't change. And I go back to, I think it was you, Rakim, that says, we know our community. Yeah. So who better to police our community? And I'm saying this knowing that there's a lot of good officers in there. Otherwise, we accept that we're never going to have representation, and then we continue to focus on just building those relationships and accept the model as it is.
100%. I appreciate.
Could I just make a
input.
point in support of Karen on this? And I think this is a this is a really tricky thing. And if we are so I absolutely agree with Karen. What drives policy, practice, outlook, the way we work, to be more effective as an organisation is to be more representative. We've got a black assistant chief constable in the force. Matt is done his entire career in West Midlands Police. He has a outlook that challenges. He looks at things from a different way. He influences the way our team operates. So there are lots of. I think there are some very good people in the organisation, and we're changing. But I used the analogy of women before. There's some really interesting research about how organisations change. What it kind of says is when you get to around 30% mark in a dominant organisation, when 30% of the people are of a different group, and we'll use women because it's a very good example, the culture and the outlook starts to change. So if you look back at policing in the past, and so you guys, a load of you are really quite young, aren't you? But if you look back in the 1980s, there was a guy in Yorkshire murdered a number of women, the Yorkshire Ripper case. Policing's attitude around rape, serious sexual offence, if you ever look back at that time, you would wince about the attitude and the way women were described. Women had gone to the pub late at night, so they were loose, moraled women, and almost this kind of whole victim blaming thing that was there. Now, what has happened during that time? Well, there's no question police is under scrutiny, of course, again around women around the Sarah Everard issue. But as I said before, there are now more women in policing than there are men in nursing. I don't see many people kicking off, by the way, about the lack of men in nursing, which I think is a real issue. But there are more women in policing, and the attitude and approach to the organisation has changed as a direct result of that. So part of the reason for seeing a difference has to be people have to put their foot in the door and say, I want to change it. And I put in the sidebar before, I absolutely know we're not a perfect organisation, because we're not. But guess what? It's 10,000 people. It ain't ever going to be. But actually, there are perceptions. One of the perceptions in the culture's got to change because people leave. Well, Karen knows the retention rate's very high in policing. When people join, they stay. And they stay in West Midlands Police. We do really well on that. We recently got surveyed externally on the top 50 inclusive companies. We judged as the second most inclusive employer in the country as West Midlands Police. So I suppose what I say today is I don't sit here and say all your perceptions and concerns are not true. You're just listening to us. What I'm saying is, at some stage, people. I think what you can do with the next generation is say, go and give it a go. Go and have a look. You listen to what they said. They ain't perfect. They ain't going to be perfect. I sat today with two officers who've been assaulted. One of them was a black officer who joined us 2 years ago. He is profoundly determined on the work he does in the street. He's incredibly proud of wearing a blue uniform, being a black man. And he knows his interactions on the street and how he works with white colleagues makes a difference day in, day out on the work he does. So there are good people who are having great careers who come in. And I think the challenge is, so we're trying really hard and we're getting things wrong. And I think I say when we get them wrong and we ain't perfect. But I think unless people step across the threshold, and you know what I think some young people are? Our police cadets are the most diverse people in West Midlands Police. There are more black and ethnic minority people in the cadets than there are in the police. That shows you at a certain age, young people are quite attracted to bits around policing. So why don't they cross the threshold? And I we've got lots of work to do, but I implore people to encourage people to take a chance. Because guess what? Karen was working in KFC. And I think Karen would have been higher in policing if she joined today, in my view. I think you'd be higher if you joined as a recruit today. Because Karen's a really talented person. And I know from the conversation with Karen, in the past, there have been a great many barriers Karen's had to come to get to where she is. Not least of it, she was working for me for a period of time. But, there are real opportunities out there in policing. And I strongly, policing's given me everything. I think it's a fantastic career. It breaks my heart more black people don't want to join. But I think it's incumbent upon people with responsible in the community saying, go give it a go and have a look. Because guess what? I think actually quite a lot of people are interested, but they're put off by what the community think.
Thank you for that input. I appreciate it. I think, to be fair, we run over time as well. So first of all, I just want to give a kind of a little quick shout out to everyone that's jumped on. Dave, as again, it goes without saying, we appreciate it. We're just normal people. Here trying to make this change, trying to make this difference, and this is kind of a pivotal moment in our journeys to try and push this change. The community that keeps supporting us every month of kind of getting behind the mission as well and supporting it. Karen, thank you for talking as well alongside Scott. It goes a long way. to be fair, Scott, he was educating me on a lot of things there as well, so I was just taking it in with my notepad. So I appreciate that as well. I don't know if Ryan wants to say anything as well, and Beresford. But yeah, it goes a long way, people. We just got to keep pushing this kind of narrative and trying to keep making these changes. And with the attitudes we have here, the people that keep supporting it, we've got to be optimistic and hope that we do see this change. And as you know, with ourselves, it's a long-lasting commitment to the cause as well. Yes, Ryan, fancy speaking?
Yes, so like I said, I'm always behind the screen. I just want to say thank you for everybody for coming and taking part in hearing my voice, because it is a big pivotal thing to bring the community closer to the West Midlands Police and the NHS, just to give a deeper understanding of why the community is like this, why we have our certain thoughts and feelings. And that's why Bouncing's here, to kind of bridge that gap, to create programs and work alongside the West Midlands Police and move forward with creating more programs in partnership to kind of make that difference. And a big shout out to Beresford as well, and all of the other organisations that have joined in and taken part. Beresford, do you want to close it out for me?
Yeah, as always, I think young people in our city get a raw deal sometimes, and when I see the way Bouncing statistics, I say that every time, operate, I just think we should be proud of them. And I think I want to thank our officers today. I just felt that was so rich. And this is the fourth one. And again, I commend the officers. Again, all of you, Dave, thank you, Scott, Ed, Karen, brilliant summing up at the end. And of course, I know we've got Bushra and we've got Suki, and also Ifti's been very quiet as well, but really appreciate everyone's time. It's you might think this is a small thing, but what's happening in the community because of this space, it's really important to acknowledge that this is a different kind of conversation, regardless of what people might think. When you get people like Michelle and Dawn in the background, who have been around as long as I have, this is a very, very different and positive conversation. So again, to all you officers and also the community that take the time out to join this, please continue to share. The next one's on the 3rd of September. I'm not sure. I think Richard might be back with us. Richard North, that is, might be back with us, and also colleagues. And I hope Ed and Scott and Richard as well, Richard Cox, can join us, because I think we've got a momentum. It's going well. And if it wasn't going well, I'm sure Rakeem would tell me. And also, I'm really pleased with the way it's going. So thank you all for your time. I'm sure everybody wants to go and tune into the athletics now. Well, certainly that's where I'm going. And so again, thank you all for your time.
See you later.
Thank you, guys. Take care, and you are free to go watch Love Island. Take care, guys.
Football.
Thank you.